presenting, presenting your viewpoints, presenting yourself, talking about why you guys believe you deserve and want the endorsement. It's a pretty simple process. We'll just go through a series of questions. Hopefully that'll be more of a discussion. We would like you guys to limit your answers to about 2 minutes. And if there's more, we can certainly talk. Great. Brooke, you want to start?
Sure.
Your last name, you're like the army. It's like
well, everyone's like Aaron, and they're both like yes.
Yeah, that's a little complicated. Keep it simple. Well, let's just dive right in. So, obviously, there's been a lot of buzz about kind of similarities between the two of you, both kind of being moderate for both of your respective parties. So, I'd be interested to hear what you see as the major differences between the two of you, as well as the similarities. Start.
Sure. I think the major differences are a few things. One is my deep connections to the community. I've been here almost 20 years. I've raised my kids here. My wife and I have started businesses here. We've been intimately involved at a lot of different levels in Bend, and I think Craig's relatively new to this area and doesn't have that kind of real connection. The second thing is I think there is a difference in terms of our partisanship. You talk about not being partisan, but I think I've really walked that talk. I've earlier in my political career, I'd like to think a long time ago, actually helped start an independent party in the state of Oregon and was kind of a main person in the Ross Perot presidential campaign in Oregon. And I've advocated for positions that are clearly against my party, marriage equality, being pro-choice, top 2 primary. I think those are things that really show my lack of partisanship, in addition to all the Democrats and who have come out and supported me. So I think that's another difference. And the third difference, I think the substance of our campaign is very different. So I'll give you many of our policy statements and the research, the depth of our positions, on education, jobs in the economy, on healthcare, those types of things. So I think those are the three big contrasts.
Do you ever find that being independent or has its shortcomings in that you maybe lose some of the wide support that you have? I mean, what insights?
We'll come back to you. No.
Yeah.
We're not.
I'll just have to remember the question.
Well, I certainly think that we can't please everyone. I do think you need to be true to yourself, and being a physician, I'm pretty data driven. I'm not very much driven by ideology. So when someone comes to me as a physician, I listen to your concerns, I search out the information to find the problem, and then get to work solving that problem in the best way I think. And that's and the criteria for fixing that problem in politics is what's in the best interest of the public. And so you're always going to lose some people. That's the nature of politics.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it needs to be data driven and within the best interest of the public.
Getting back to that, and I guess I'll talk to you. So I'm a proud Democrat, always have been. I jumped into this race not because I was a Democrat or Republican, because I believe that Bend needs a leader. And I'm a proven leader. I served with distinction in the military. I'm sure many of you have read some of the letters that have come back from my soldiers that have unsolicited written letters on my behalf telling what type of leader I was. I think that's the distinction that I've led in combat, that I've led when the chips are down. And let's face it, Bend is at a crossroads. We're at a crossroads in growth. We're at a crossroads of a widening income gap, quite frankly. When I'm knocking on doors, I hear stories of folks that are truly struggling to stay in Bend, a place that they, like many of us, chose to live. The fact that I have not been in this community should not negate the fact that I love it. That's the reason why I'm here. I was in the military. I moved around a lot. And everywhere that I went, I invested myself into the community in some way. And that's my intentions for running, and that's how I'll lead this community, and that was first and foremost. Secondly, you know, I too will push back on party ideology when it's not best for Bend, when it's not best for Oregon. You know, the fact that you're saying you're being independent, you sure are playing some party politics. And so I would push back and say that, you know, let's be real here. I think you need to be here, be present, and be fighting for Bend and the people that are here and need us most. And that's where I distinguish myself from my opponent.
So take this as not a challenge, but as ask for a clarification. A lot of what I just heard could have also applied to city council candidate of wanting, you know, the concerns that you have about where Bend stands. Why choose this race and not city council? Because and you know, city council needs leadership. City council needs the representation of the ideas that you have. Why did you choose this office?
Why did I choose going for the legislature?
Right, and for you know what will be somewhat of representing
Sure.
concerns here, but
Sure.
on a state level.
Sure. Because, quite frankly, I think that as a legislature, you have the ability not only to be a leader here and bring folks together here that need to have the dialogue and the conversation, but you can affect how Bend's changes and how Oregon's legislation can affect Bend. And that's where I felt as a leader I could most help the community is working through tough laws, bringing folks from all different sides, just like I did in the military. We had competing missions, limited resources, competing missions, and it was getting those folks that wouldn't otherwise be at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a legislator, that is the best place that I could do that for Bend and for the state of Oregon.
Maybe why House Rep?
You know, I think a couple of reasons. I think there's a lot of really serious challenges facing the state. You know, the jobs, the economy, it comes up over and over again as we're out there talking to people. I think we all feel that the economy is getting better, but the jobs that have been replaced are not the jobs that were lost 5 years ago. People are working harder and harder to keep up. Too many people are being left behind. And I think someone needs to really focus on that, not only for Bend, but also the state. You know, rural Oregon is suffering, and Bend really should be helping rural Oregon, those surrounding counties close by. I think some of the things we've learned here in Bend, you know, the entrepreneurial spirit, we should really help spread that to other rural counties and say, here are some of the things we've learned on how to rebuild some of these economies, transfer them from a natural resource-based economy to a more knowledge-based economy, you know, leverage some of those unique assets that the state of Oregon has. And the second thing is, you know, it bothers me a lot as a parent having our kids go through schools here to see the conditions, especially of K through 12. I mean, so many metrics were just falling behind. And that is so essential that we prepare our kids for the 21st century. In a knowledge-based economy, school's even more important than what it's been in the past. And I don't want to look at my kids in 10 years and have them say, Dad, you know, you were trained to do this type of stuff. You have this kind of experience. How come you didn't stand up, even though it may not be comfortable, even though you may have to leave your chosen profession and try to do something about that? And I think those two issues are really linked. They go hand in hand. You know, a successful economy and a good education system really are going to be increasingly important for the vitality of all these communities. And I think the legislature is a perfect place to address those.
I wanted to return to a question about party politics. You know, Bend has a history of moderates going to the House and having party politics weighing in. How do you assure voters that, with respect to your party, because you are both running as moderates, that you don't get run, that you are able to vote your conscience, and that you are standing by the principles you espouse today, but that you're strong enough to stand up to your party?
You want me to start? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think it's simple. I think it goes back to values, how you are, how you lead. I wouldn't have been a successful Army officer had I just towed to what I was supposed to do. You have to make real tough decisions in really tough situations and do so without somebody telling you what to do. That's how I'll lead. That's how I lead now. That's how I live my life. So I think it's really important that as long as you communicate that, as long as you let folks where you stand, that you have to, you'll take the licks, of course, but it's something that if you believe in and you know that it's best for your constituency here, it's the way that I'll lead.
I just maybe put a little more focus on it. Are there any military leaders that you've adopted some of their philosophies from, or that you've studied, or is there anyone that's of historic interest to you?
Sure. Just modern day, I'll go to one of my mentors, Lieutenant General Palumbo, Ray Palumbo. He's at the Pentagon right now. He was a Special Operations Command commander. He is a person that has been my personal mentor for quite some time, and is a great American, great hero. I continue to seek his counsel, and
Well, why him?
why him? Because he is somebody that does think outside the box, that has defied traditional military, what everybody says should be a military person. He has followed and led from his heart and led in what's right for the people, and that's what I've espoused when I've commanded units, is making sure that first and foremost, I always said mission always, people first, and it's part of my mantra to this day. So he's a modern day one.
Mm-hmm. I just want to keep on this and we'll get over that. I'm curious if there's any shortcomings or concerns about the military structure in a more civilian setting. Military structure is obviously very much based on the hierarchy, and this is not necessarily, you're not walking into a hierarchy here. I mean, this is supposed to be a consensus. Is there any concerns on that, or where does flexibility come in?
I think what you're asking is there concerns that I have lived a structured or operated in a structured environment. I would say I've been in government.
Sure.
I would tell you that the military is one of the most flexible organizations in the entire world, believe it or not. I didn't know that until I got into the business world. And dealing with corporations and dealing with a lot of the bureaucracy that is developed in corporations. Military is pretty darn flexible. Where I think that I hold the advantage, quite frankly, in dealing with government is I worked at the Pentagon for 2 years. I know bureaucracy. I know what you have to do in order to get things through. Same in the military. When you're out on the front lines and you're making decisions, and gosh, I sure wish those decisions were the right ones. I mean, I told my folks, I'd make over 100 decisions a day. I would hope that 87% of them were good, and thankfully they were. The ones that weren't, I owned up to them.
I think that's a key question, and I think a good lead, a good insight to that is how we run our campaigns. And I think my campaign has been very independent driven. We've run it from here. I think Craig's has been very much driven by the Democratic caucus, and I think the best indication of that is follow the money. Look at all the in-kind contributions from the Democratic caucus, and look at the over 1,100 individual donors. I'm not beholden to any single person. We run this campaign from here. I think that gives you a fair amount of freedom to be that independent actor in Salem. I think also the ability to reach across the traditional party lines here in Central Oregon. Having endorsements from a lot of Democrats, having 28 local officials who are Republicans, Democrats, and Independents shows that I can galvanize those type of people, and that's what's needed to get things done now. As we've noticed, power is very dispersed in our society right now, and to think that we can just go to Salem and have impact, it takes a lot of other things to come together. And I think someone who has those kind of deep connections in Oregon can mobilize those forces. My role at St. Charles Health System, the Ford Family Foundation, OSU Foundation, those are kind of the places where you need to bring all those people together in a collective vision and align the interest and try to make positive change.
There have been a lot of people that have come from here with those same kind of connections, have gotten over to Salem and found the structure over there less than moderate. And is there anything more that you can speak to with regard to standing up to those kind of powers? I mean, basic support is one thing, basic support here, but getting over there and finding that same spine in an unfamiliar area is...
Well, I think a couple of things. It kind of speaks to the ability to get things done even when you're not in the legislature of Salem. In '94, I led the effort in the state for the first real campaign finance reform in generations. We got a measure passed that severely limited, individual contributions and spending limits. I was not in the legislature. I was actually a resident at OHSU living in Portland, was able to put together a coalition of diverse people, both from the left and the right, residual, the pro movement, Common Cause, League of Women Voters, and that was certainly standing up to both parties. I think my strong advocacy for the top two primary, I've been on the steering committees the first two times we tried to do that, very much against parties and standing up and try to do something that I think is good for the state, not necessarily good for the parties, and it comes at some personal cost in doing so. So I think those are real concrete examples. But I think you're right. I think the parties have captured the political process too much, and not only the political process, but the governing process. And I think there needs to be some structural changes to dial that back and make it more amenable for an independent voice to poke through. And I think there's a couple structural changes to make. One is independent redistricting. People are drawing those districts more and more extreme so that the moderate can't break through. And I think opening the primary up to independents, non-affiliated voters, those things are what will allow kind of the political culture to change.
Knute, did you want to, sorry, Craig, did you want to follow up with something?
Well, look, I'm a proud Democrat, but my message and my values and the reason why I'm running is all Craig Wilhelm. You're a Republican. Your money is coming from Republican interests, the Republican Party.
That's not true.
We
just check the donor rolls.
Okay.
The vast majority is from individuals.
We can bet that.
That's just simply a factual error.
Knute, we both were selected to be a part of the independent party nomination. You got it. You won by 13 votes. 41 people voted. Okay, so I would say that as far as saying that you're an independent, you're certainly playing party politics. I am running because I care deeply about Bend. I care deeply about this community, and my party definitely is interested in this race, just like your party is. But I'm hitting the streets every day, knocking on doors, talking with folks, making sure that their voices is heard, because I care deeply about this community, and that's why I'm running. So this is not about party politics. This is about being a leader and leading from the front and making sure that folks' voices that don't necessarily get heard. That's why I'm running.
Yeah. So I think it's probably safe to say that you both care about Bend, and you're both relatively independent, but you both belong to political parties. For whatever degree of independence you have, you've chosen to align yourself with a party. What I'd love to get back to, which is kind of the first question that I feel like didn't really get answered in the way I'd hoped, are there any particular issues on which you hold different positions? Because I think, can kind of talk till you're blue in the face about the particular nuances of your roots in the community, or how much you care about this, that, or the other, and what have you. But I think a lot of people want to know, are you taking a different stand on issues? And that's been really hard for people to parse out. So if you can, and maybe you aren't, and that's fine. You can say that. But.
Well, I think there's quite a bit of diversity in the Oregon Republican Party, but I think a couple issues which, you know, I think the Oregon Republican Party would probably differ with me. Three main ones. I'm pro-choice. Always been pro-choice. Said it over and over again. He's handed out nearly 15,000 pieces of literature on people's doorstep that says I'm pro-choice. I believe in marriage equality. So then I think everyone should be equal before the law. There's no other statement on there about it. And I'm for opening up the primaries to independent voters. And I think those are three, you know, pretty specific policy positions that differ in a large portion of the Republican Party.
Just to clarify, not to interrupt, but I meant between the two of you.
Oh.
So like
Well, I think
on
we-
what positions, or what positions
Positions
might
you
you
differ rather than each
Oh,
other.
I see. Okay.
But that was helpful, I appreciated that answer as well.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, Craig's kind of refused to take positions on the ballot measures. I suspect we do differ on the
Do you want
top
to just
two.
run down where you stand on all the ballot measures real quick?
I'm not sure I can recall them all there.
Let's start with it.
90 is
The
the top two primary.
Which you said you support.
Yeah.
Right?
But you support that as well.
I don't.
No.
Okay.
I actually don't. This is where we differ, and this is to answer your question. I am absolutely for voter access. We definitely have a non-affiliated party that feels disenfranchised. Believe me, I hear it every day when I'm talking to folks at their doorstep. And it can be disenfranchised from the national level down. So I'm all for access. I don't think the ballot initiative for open primaries accomplishes what the intent is, and that is to grant access. I think it opens a longer primary. It adds money to the political process that we do not need. If what you're telling me that you fought for early on in your political career, we do not need more money in politics, period, and that does open itself up to more money being put in. The second thing that it does is that the federal and the state system then would not line up, so you basically in effect create a two ballot system that could potentially add money to the system again, and it would certainly drive those disenfranchised voters in the first place to get confused, possibly get more disenfranchised. So I think that the way that that ballot measure is written, I do not support it.
Craig, what's another place where you're different?
Can we just keep going through the ballot
Sure,
measure?
sure.
Is that
Medical marijuana.
91?
Medical marijuana, the voters are going to decide. Here's where I have a problem, and this is where I differ
Legalizing
from
marijuana.
Yeah, this is where I differ from my party a bit. If the ballot measure should pass, there's a lot of challenges that will be faced in the legislature that will have to have an immediate effect in terms of decision making. That's to decide on the DUII legislation, to decide how we're going to legislate when it comes to opening it up and the effects that it will have on children, and will that increase children going to the emergency room. So I am, it's certainly in the voters' hands, but I am concerned that there's secondary and tertiary effects in terms of cost to our state and in terms of legislative process that's going to have to happen.
Do you support
So yes or no?
Do I support legal?
Measure 91.
I have not made a decision on that because it really is to the voters, and I'm concentrated on what will be the after effects of that.
Nate?
I support medical marijuana, but I don't support full-scale legalization right now. I think we should go slow. I think it's probably inevitable, but I think we should watch and learn from the experiences in Colorado and Washington. This issue, I think everyone realizes, is more complex than when we started, in terms of putting marijuana into different food sources, the access that children may have to it. The THC concentration is not what, not our parents' marijuana. I think those things need to be worked out before we jump full.
And THC concentration in the edibles is a concern, and I think that's something to.
What about the driver's license measure, allowing folks, undocumented folks to have?
Yeah. I think these kind of one-off trying to, solve immigration problems at the state level if these partial solutions is not the way to do it. We need a whole-scale immigration reform at the national level. And giving someone a legal document who's here illegally, I don't support. It's just it's something that we shouldn't kind of haphazardly put together in the state of Oregon. We should fix it on a national level.
Okay.
I think from the driver's card perspective, I think that the measure is horribly written, and the intent of it is being lost. I think that there is a broader discussion on a federal level that has to happen, and broader discussion on immigration. And so I think it's just a poorly written measure.
If it were better written, do you support the idea of helping give undocumented workers access to a driver's license for all the reasons that come with it?
I think there's a federal conversation that has to happen on immigration. What I do think that the intention was, from a safety perspective, I can understand, but the way that it's written, I think it's muddled.
Well, I don't really see any way that we're going to get any federal movement on that anytime soon. So
Aaron, you
except to be working
Until after
on
the
it.
election.
Yeah, I know. I'm a skeptic on it. So.
Yeah.
I think the last really high profile would be the GMO labeling.
Craig, why don't you
Okay.
say that?
Again, the GMO labeling, I am all for consumers being able to have information for them. Again, I think the GMO is part of a broader discussion, again, on federal level, because legislation that happens in the state, there's some implications that happen across borders that I think needs to be looked at, secondary and tertiary effects of that. I think the way that the GMO thing is written is certainly about access to consumers, and I can sign up for that. But I think we need to have a broader discussion on a federal GMO standard if we're going to go that route.
Yeah, I think this is better solved again at the federal level. Unfortunately, we have that kind of stasis at our, in DC, and these issues are being pushed down to a lower level where they really shouldn't be. I have concerns if Oregon passes it, increasing the cost of food in Oregon, and we already have a problem with food insecurity in the state. We have some of the highest uses of food pantries, and I think that would worsen with this. I think it'd add to the red tape, the regulatory burden in Oregon, and I think we already have a problem with that. That's one of the things I hear over and over again talking to small businesses. You don't hear so much, you hear a little bit about the taxes, but the thing you hear over and over again talking to small business owners is the excessive rules and regulations and all the red tape. I think that would add to it. And both those negatives come with no real scientific evidence that genetically modified foods have caused any harm. You know, from lots of independent government panels who've looked at this, I think it's just too high of a cost for the little benefit that we might get. You know, the easier solution to this is just let's continue to label things that are organic, and then the people who want to buy organic and non-GMO food they can pay for it, but don't force it on everyone else. And I think that's a better solution.
I mean, obviously part of being a legislator is you know, some of these measures may pass and you don't agree with them, but you're going to have to deal with them. Is there a particular issue that you are least looking forward to having to deal with at the state legislature?
Boy, that's a good one. I think I mean, that's a great question. You know,
It's something that people
because you're going to have to, right?
Right.
Any legislation that is presented that is a state solution, where there's federal implications from let's take the GMO for example. There is cross-state and national implications, not only for our farmers, not only for our consumers. So it's those types of things that I think as a legislature, again, I think you have to rise above your party in this sense, is that you have to look at it in totality. How does it help Bend? How does it help Central Oregon? How does it help Oregon? But what are the secondary and tertiary effects in the longer term? I do a lot of strategic, well, I did a lot of strategic planning work in the military. I do a lot for my company. I did some for Central Oregon in terms of the Crook County Foundation, the Bethlehem Inn, the Central Oregon Food Policy Council that's now been renamed. So I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to strategic planning. I think that, unfortunately, the way that it works in Oregon is that you're elected every 2 years. So 2 years is not quite a bit of time to look so beyond that. I think as a legislature, you need to look beyond your 2 years in office. You need to look what those effects have on Oregon in the longer term, and the effects it has on small businesses here in Oregon, the effects it has on individuals here in Central Oregon, and that's what I'll be looking at. So any sort of legislation like that, I think, is a real tough look, but I'm willing to have that look. That's why I'm in this job.
Yeah.
Things you want to avoid.
Yeah, PERS reform. I think that's been such a divisive issue, and the only reason I think we'd have to do it is if the reforms passed last session aren't upheld by the state Supreme Court. I think there was a good movement on that. Both sides gave a little bit to come up with meaningful PERS reform that cut our unfunded liability in half from $16 billion to $8 billion. It put our schools and a lot of our public services on much more stable financial ground, and I don't think we need to do that again. We don't need to kind of create that divisiveness and make people concerned about their pensions, and hopefully it won't be needed now that we've decreased that unfunded liability by so much.
So you both kind of shied away from wanting to take a position on things that you feel might have federal implications. So I'm wondering what issues or subjects you think will come up on the state level that wouldn't have federal implications, or that you would feel comfortable taking that kind of a strong stand on.
Yeah, why don't we start with
Yeah. Well, I think healthcare reform, is going to be, fortunately, an issue that's been driven down to the state level, and appropriately so. I think it's one of those great issues that the state should be allowed to use that, marvelous federal system that's been set up so that states can experiment on the best way to deliver healthcare services. And I think the governor did a nice job in getting that waiver from the federal, from the Obama administration to allow us to experiment here. The problem is he did make a promise that we now have to deliver on the state level, and that promise is, he took $1.9 billion in federal funds with the promise that we decrease the healthcare inflation trend by 2%. And that means that we have to reform and make sure that the delivery system, the CCOs, works in this state and decreases that medical inflation trend.
I think there's three that I think are going to be immediate legislation. The first one being, and the most immediate for me because I'm passionate about veterans, is we have this law in the books in the Oregon VA system. It's for the home loans, where there's a federal and state law that don't align. And so veterans that have a home loan with higher rates can't refinance their home. That's an immediate thing that we as a legislature should tackle. It should be happening 3 or 4 years ago. And so that's what I'll be working really passionately about. Second thing is definitely healthcare. There's a lot more to be done. We need to push this forward. I do agree with my opponent here that the CCO model, we need to work to continue to refine that. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done in terms of the coordinated care at a community level, and we have to, continue to drive down our healthcare costs, but increase quality. That's going to be really important as we move forward. And then access. I'm very happy to see that we are gaining access for people within our community have access to healthcare, but we need to keep driving it forward and making sure that we are doing the right things and not having folks being held harmless by the things that the state has done in deficiency. And that leads to my third point is, and I'll be working really hard, is making sure that we hold government accountability, continuing to push and make sure that we have systems in place where government contracts, people are held accountable. and state agencies are held accountable. When I was in the military, I was responsible for millions and millions of dollars of equipment, and you know, amazingly, I was responsible for human lives, over 200 in Iraq and Afghanistan. If something happened on my watch, I was accountable for it. If an aircraft went down, if a piece of equipment went broken, I was responsible for it. I signed for that inventory. I had to deliver that inventory back at the end of my command. If I didn't, I was responsible monetarily up to a point. That's what we need to do with our accountability systems in Oregon. It drives down, in my opinion, in the long term, drives down waste, which drives down cost, and that's what I'll be focused on.
Yeah, I think we all want government accountability. It's easy to say that. I mean, government accountability, good government is not a partisan issue. We all want that. I think where Craig and I differ is you know, I have real ideas for bringing accountability to the state of Oregon. I mean, I know where we lack in our audit abilities. I mean, the state legislature has a legislative audit committee that doesn't even work. And you think with the stuff that's been going on with Columbia River Crossing and Cover Oregon, that audit committee would be activated and get going. We have a Secretary of State who has real levers to pull to hold people accountable, mainly withholding the distribution of some public funds if the audit recommendations aren't upheld. That's not being used. So those are the types of things that I know, and I will introduce legislation to help take care of it, to bolster that legislative audit committee. That's, I think, the key difference between Craig and I. We all want that, but I'm bringing real ideas to the table, and that's what's a lot harder to do.
And I would push back a little bit. Ideas and experience in those accountability measures. I mean, you know, I've had experience in making sure that you hold somebody accountable in a contract. So I would differ and say that I would push back on that.
Yeah, a legislature can be used as a metaphor with team. You know, it's team, and we're looking to draft one of you to come on to the squad. What quality, not for Central Oregon, but for the legislature as a whole, do you think that you're bringing that's unique or different, and you know, what can we expect from something like that? Yeah. I'll let Craig start first.
Well, one of my mentors said, General Palumbo, he said, Craig, when I come into your company area, into your hangar, and I'm talking with folks, there's folks that are on board with Team Wilhelm, and there's folks that are not. And I went driving home that night thinking, what does he mean by that? And I was actually taken aback. But as I started to think about it, I said, you know, that's exactly where I want to be. That there is no gray area with Team Wilhelm. There is no gray area. And that's what I brought when I led troops, and that's where I brought in my company, and that's where I'll bring here, is that you lead with heart, you lead with conviction, you take care of your troops or your team. That's what I did and continue to do in life.
You know, I think Craig's right. He's learned a lot about leadership from the service and military, and I have great respect for that. But I think it's different leading with a real command and control structure of the military versus leading in civilian life. I think it's much more complex and requires a different skill set. You know, I've led a medical group of 36 independent-minded people. It's very much like leading a caucus. You have a bunch of people who've been self-selected for their independence and their ability to lead independently. To be a leader of leaders is tough. It's similar to running a group of surgeons. You know, there's special skills that are required there. The second thing is, to underline a point I made earlier, I think power in our society is now very dispersed. It's different than it has been in the past. And the key to leading people in that situation is deep relationships. And I think someone like myself, who's been in Oregon for that long, been involved in a lot of different organizations, I have those relationships and are much more likely to align them in a collective direction. And I think that's just a different way you have to lead now, and different than leading in the military.
I disagree. I've led in both. I've led in society. I've worked with nonprofits. I have a nonprofit. So I would disagree wholeheartedly in terms of combat leadership and leading troops in the toughest of times and moving that to leading in the civilian sector. It is certainly, there are many similarities, but there's also things that you can take from those experiences and really apply them and get things done.
So before we slip into a debate, we're going to wrap it up. We're cognizant of both of your time. Also want to say we all appreciate both of your, commitment to doing this, and and again, it's not for the pay that you guys are going after this. Why do you want our endorsement, or why do you believe you deserve our endorsement? We'll start with.
Yeah. Well, I value the role that you play in our community in terms of encouraging independent, out-of-the-box thinking. I think you have an important constituency out there that follows you, and I think that's something that is valued and needs to be valued more. I mean, I think a effective, healthy fourth estate is crucial to our political process, and I'm worried about that withering right now. So anything I can do to enhance your ability to have influence, no matter if I agree with you or not, I think is key to having a healthy political dialogue and political discourse.
Okay.
For me, it's important because I think you're an incredible voice for our community. You reach people that would not otherwise be connected. It's a way to connect folks, and I would be excited to have your endorsement because you would be that voice to folks and say, we're holding Wilhelm accountable, and we're holding Wilhelm to the values of our community, and I appreciate that. I think it's such an important role in our community to have that voice for folks that may or may not agree with me. You hear my commercials. You don't have to agree with me 100%. Just that you have that voice and that you can come to me at any time and say, hey Craig, what gives? And that's what I'm excited about to have your endorsement, is because I do value your voice in the community.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Endorsement, or our election issue will come out in 2 weeks.
All right, good deal.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Nice seeing you.
Good time.